The CEO was not blind, and only the daughter of the new cleaner discovers what it was. You won't believe. The Sterling Tower was less an office building and more a vertical kingdom, a shimmering titan of glass and steel that speared the Manhattan sky. It commanded a view of the city that felt less like an observation deck and more like an assessment. For 18-year-old Maya, whose world was usually confined to the cramped, vibrant chaos of a Brooklyn apartment, the tower's highest floor, the penthouse residence of the CEO, was a different planet entirely, a sterile, silent one. Her mother, Eva, had secured the coveted cleaning contract for the personal residence of Alexander Sterling, the enigmatic head of Sterling Corp. It was a job that promised better pay, but demanded absolute discretion and flawless execution. Eva's English was sufficient, but her nerves were not. So under the guise of an assistant, Maya was there, less for the cleaning and more for the quiet, meticulous organization that came naturally to her, a skill born from years of trying to bring order to their small, chaotic life. Maya's real passion was art. She saw the world not as it was, but as it was composed, light, shadow, texture, and pattern. It was this artist's eye, this involuntary need to observe the minute details, that would soon set her reality on a collision course with the perfectly constructed facade of Alexander Sterling. The residence was a study in severe minimalism. Everything was glass, chrome, and marble. The furniture was architectural, not comfortable. It was a space designed to impress, not to live in. In the vast living room, where one entire wall was a seamless window overlooking Central Park, a single figure stood out like a deliberate, carefully placed sculpture, Alexander Sterling. He was barely 30, a remarkably young age, to command an empire this size. He was also a figure of tragedy and legend. 3 years prior, a highly publicized, mysterious car accident had reportedly taken the lives of his fiancée and his sight, leaving him with a fortune and a permanent disability. The official story was a narrative of resilience. The blind CEO who governed his corporation with fierce intellect, relying only on touch, sound, and instinct. Today, Alexander was meeting with his COO, Mr. Davies, in the massive soundproof library. Maya and Eva were working silently in the adjacent hallway, polishing a floor so reflective it mirrored the city lights. Alexander emerged from the library, dismissing Davies with a terse, deep voice that carried an unmistakable tone of authority, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed instantly. He was impeccably dressed, as always, in a bespoke navy blue suit, a sharp contrast to the pale grey and white palette of his home. His silver tie clip and the precise fold of his pocket square spoke volumes about his relentless pursuit of order, even in the absence of sight. Maya watched him move. He walked with a cane, tapping lightly ahead of him, his head held, slightly tilted, giving the impression of someone listening intently to the world around him. His eyes, a striking shade of light grey, were unfocused, seemingly fixed on a point far beyond the glass walls of the penthouse. The legend of Alexander's control was well established within the corporate grapevine. Staff whispers claimed he could identify an employee by the sound of their footsteps alone, or tell the day of the week by the humidity. Maya dismissed these as typical corporate hyperbole until she witnessed a small scene that froze her in place. Alexander moved towards a low, modernist console near the window. A small silver pen, which had been perfectly centered on the console earlier, had been nudged slightly off-center by Eva's hurried dusting cloth, an error Eva had missed in her panic to be thorough. Maya's heart thumped. She started forward, ready to whisper a warning to her mother about the misplaced object, certain that the slightest disruption would incur the CEO's displeasure. Alexander stopped precisely in front of the console. Without breaking stride, without his cane touching the console, and without any visible hesitation, he reached out his hand and placed his forefinger directly on the silver pen. He lifted it, turned it over, and then, with the same effortless motion, placed it back exactly where it should have been. The movement was swift, precise, and entirely fluid. He continued his walk towards the elevator bank, the cane tapping, the navy blue suit gliding through the silent space. He did not falter, did not sniff the air, did not use his fingers to feel around the surface. He simply knew. Maya stood still, her cleaning cloth forgotten. Her artistic eye, trained to analyze angles and spatial relationships, had just witnessed an impossible feat. The movement was not the practiced routine of a man who had memorized his environment. It was the direct action of someone who could see. It was the difference between memory and awareness. Her mind immediately raced through the possibilities. Had she imagined it? No. The pen was definitely moved. Had he heard it clatter? No. The pen was placed silently. Maya's breathing quickened. The cool, detached environment of the Sterling Tower suddenly felt suffocating, electric with a tension only she could feel. She had just seen behind the curtain of the most powerful man she knew. The man in the navy blue suit was not blind. But if he wasn't blind, what was he? The thought was exhilarating and terrifying. It felt like holding a single, fragile thread that could unravel an entire masterpiece or strangle her. Maya knew in that gut-deep artistic way that she couldn't simply forget what she saw. Her professional obligation was to clean. Her instinct was to investigate. The precision with which Alexander Sterling had repositioned the silver pen replayed in Maya's mind like a glitch in the simulation of reality. It was a silent, 3-second movement, yet it had shattered the carefully curated narrative of his life. For the rest of the week, Maya's artist's eye was no longer observing aesthetic compositions. It was scanning for inconsistencies. Her mother, Eva, deeply grateful for the lucrative contract, insisted on absolute silence and professionalism. "We are invisible, Maya. We clean, we leave, we take the check. Nothing else." But invisibility, for Maya, had just become a cloak for espionage. The arrangement was simple. Eva was the official cleaner, and Maya was her silent, detail-oriented assistant. The schedule was set for 3 times a week, always during the twilight hours after the core business day had ended, but before Alexander retired for the night. This timing was calculated, a fact Maya noted. It gave the CEO an audience, a silent set of witnesses to his blind routine, reinforcing the lie. Alexander Sterling rarely spoke to them. When he did, it was usually a direct low command to Eva, his voice carrying that same authoritative timbre. "Mrs. Santos, the library windows require attention." He never looked towards them, his gaze always fixed slightly above their heads, which, Maya realized, was the standard focus point for a polite, sighted person addressing someone standing at a short distance. Maya began her quiet testing. In the vast, open-plan kitchen, she deliberately shifted the sugar bowl 3 inches to the left of its marked spot on the marble counter. The next day, when Alexander walked past, escorted by his chief of security, Marcus, he reached for the bowl to retrieve a spoon resting nearby. His fingers, instead of finding the spoon immediately, briefly skimmed the empty spot where the bowl should have been, before correcting his reach, locating the bowl, and completing the action flawlessly. It was almost too good. The slightest hesitation, a millisecond of blind fumbling, followed by a perfect correction. Was it a highly practiced routine or a genuine memory lapse? Maya couldn't tell, but the brief misstep suggested he was relying on a memorized map of the room, yet his recovery was too swift, too smooth, too confident. One evening, while Maya was wiping down the CEO's grand desk in his private study, she noticed the slight, almost imperceptible wear pattern on the black leather of his desk chair. She was certain she had seen the same wear pattern years ago in a photograph her mother had clipped from an old business magazine, a photograph of Alexander's father, the former CEO. It was a chair that had traveled with the family through generations of power. She carefully examined the objects on his desk, a heavy silver lighter, a leather-bound day planner, and a small antique paperweight shaped like a lion. Everything was aligned with mathematical precision. Then she noticed a small raised indentation on the wooden surface beneath the day planner. It wasn't a scratch, it was a recessed outline. Using a thin piece of paper, Maya made a rubbing of the outline. The shape that emerged was not the day planner, nor the lighter. It was the precise, unique footprint of an old-fashioned diary or small lockbox. Whatever Alexander was truly hiding, it wasn't kept in plain sight. It was hidden or moved frequently, but always returned to that precise spot. This detail, this deliberate and frequent movement of a private item, elevated the mystery. He wasn't just hiding his sight, he was hiding a secret that required active protection. As she finished up, folding her cloths, Marcus, the bulky chief of security, appeared in the doorway. Marcus was a former military man, always in a dark, impeccably pressed suit, usually black or charcoal, making Alexander's navy blue suit stand out even more. "You're the girl, Maya?" Marcus asked, his voice low and flat, his eyes missing nothing. "Yes, sir." "Good. This is Mr. Sterling's sanctuary, his condition. It requires predictability. Anything out of place, anything moved, causes him immense distress. Your mother is aware of the protocol. I trust you are too." It was a warning wrapped in a concern for the CEO's condition. Maya met his gaze evenly. "I understand, Mr. Marcus. Everything is returned precisely as it was found." As she left, she glanced back. Marcus was not watching her mother clean. He was watching her. Maya realized that her investigation was now officially underway, and the CEO wasn't her only obstacle. She had entered a game of observation and subterfuge, where the simple act of cleaning had become a subtle battleground of trust and control. The outline beneath the day planner was her first real piece of evidence. Now she just needed to find the lockbox that fit it. Sim, é no capítulo 3 que a dúvida de Maya se transforma em convicção. Aqui está o capítulo 3, focado no teste direto de Maya, e no momento em que a farsa é inequivocamente confirmada. Chapter 3, The Little Slip-Up. Maya knew the subtle tests weren't enough. Shifting a bowl or a pen could be explained by muscle memory, precise hearing, or an eidetic recall of the penthouse's fixed layout. If Alexander Sterling was truly faking his blindness, he was a master of the performance, weaving minute, believable errors into his routine to sustain the illusion. She needed an anomaly, something that couldn't be rationalized away. Her opportunity came 2 days later. Alexander had been delayed in a meeting, giving her and Eva an unexpected window of solitude in the expansive, sun-drenched living room. On a massive, low marble pedestal sat a priceless, smooth-surfaced antique vase, an heirloom, Maya assumed, from the reverence with which Eva dusted around it. It was the only object in the entire room that wasn't fixed, yet it was never moved. Maya took a deep breath. This was reckless. If she was wrong, she would ruin her mother's contract and invite the scrutiny of Marcus. But if she was right, she would hold the key to the entire glass empire. She placed the vase back down, but not on the pedestal. Instead, she gently slid it onto the thick, plush, charcoal-colored rug directly in front of the pedestal. It was low to the ground, surrounded by silence, and completely unexpected. A genuinely blind person, relying on spatial memory and cane taps, would never anticipate an obstacle there, especially not one that posed a tripping hazard. Maya quickly returned to her cleaning station. Her heart pounded a desperate rhythm against her ribs. Alexander entered the living room 5 minutes later, still on a business call via a discreet earpiece. He was a study in power, his back straight, his navy blue suit impeccably tailored, moving with his signature tapping cane. Mr. Davies, his COO, trailed slightly behind him, talking in quiet, deferential tones. The CEO was heading directly toward the pedestal, presumably to continue his conversation by the panoramic window. Tap, tap, tap. The cane found the marble floor, then the marble pedestal. Alexander's pace was steady. Maya held her breath, watching the space where the vase now sat. The vase was directly in his path. The marble floor ended, and the soft rug began. Alexander took one step onto the rug. His cane missed the vase entirely, gliding over the thick fibers. He took a second step. His shoe was milliseconds away from making contact with the base of the priceless heirloom. Then, with an effortless, utterly fluid motion that had no business belonging to a man who couldn't see, Alexander raised his foot a perfect 4 inches higher than his usual stride. He cleared the vase without slowing down, without touching it, and without any change in the severe, focused expression on his face. The motion was not a fumble, nor a correction. It was a direct, predictive avoidance. A blind man would have hit it, or at least his cane would have found it. A highly practiced blind man might have sensed the change in the rug's acoustics, but the CEO's movement was visual, calculated in 3-dimensional space. He had seen it. He had known precisely where the vase was located. He continued toward the window, ending his phone call with a sharp "done," completely oblivious, or so he pretended, to the small, near catastrophe he had just navigated. Mr. Davies, walking behind, was equally oblivious, stepping over the vase casually. The wave of certainty that washed over Maya was overwhelming. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was a fact. Alexander Sterling was not blind. The relief was immediately replaced by a chilling terror. She had just confirmed the greatest secret of one of the most powerful and ruthless men in the city. A man whose facade of vulnerability was his greatest weapon. A man who was playing a long, dangerous game with the world as his audience. Maya had to move the vase back immediately before Alexander could somehow sense the lack of the obstacle on his return journey. Her hands shook as she hurried, replacing the artifact on the pedestal. That night, as she lay in bed in her small apartment, Maya looked at the rubbing she had taken of the outline beneath the day planner. She was convinced that whatever item fit that space, a diary, a lockbox, a journal, contained the key to what he was hiding, and why. The question was no longer, can he see? But what does he see that is so terrifying he must pretend to be blind to protect it? The revelation that Alexander Sterling could see transformed every subsequent encounter into a tense, silent chess match. Maya realized that every gesture, every tap of the cane, every empty stare was a deliberate performance. The man in the navy blue suit was an actor playing the most critical role of his life. Maya's next move was not a physical one, but a psychological test. She needed to know if his secret was purely defensive or something rooted in trauma. The penthouse walls were largely bare, maintaining the minimalist aesthetic. However, there was a vast, empty gallery wall near the dining area, intended for a centerpiece. The official story was that Alexander, being blind, saw no need to fill the space. Knowing his routine, Maya waited until Alexander was in his study, a space she wasn't allowed to enter, and then quickly executed her plan. Using a high-quality print she carried in her backpack, she taped a photograph onto the empty gallery wall. It wasn't just any photograph. It was a stark, black-and-white image of an old, shattered antique car. A wreck so devastating it was clearly fatal. It was a subtle, almost abstract representation of the kind of wreckage that supposedly caused his blindness. The test was simple. If he was truly emotionally detached and only using the blindness as a business shield, he would likely walk right past it or be alerted by Marcus. But if the trauma was real, his reaction might betray the depth of the pain he masked. She barely had time to put her materials away when Alexander emerged. He was on a call, his voice low and firm, his navy blue suit contrasting sharply with the white hallway. Tap, tap, tap. He walked directly towards the gallery wall, Mr. Davies several paces behind him. As he approached the photo, Maya watched with bated breath. He didn't swerve, he didn't hesitate. But as he passed the image, something invisible shifted. His walk, usually so measured and smooth, hitched a fraction of a second. It was less a physical stumble and more a slight, almost imperceptible falter in his personal rhythm, like a conductor briefly missing a beat. His head remained tilted, but his jaw clenched, tightening a muscle visible beneath his skin. He walked past and continued his conversation, finishing the phone call with flawless professionalism. But Maya had seen it, a deep, visceral recognition. The pretense of blindness was a tool, but the trauma was real. He was not just deceiving his rivals, he was burying a profound tragedy. Later that evening, while wiping down the antique cabinet where she suspected the item was hidden, Maya found her chance. Marcus had stepped out to take a call. Eva was cleaning a distant bathroom. Maya knelt before the cabinet, recalling the precise dimensions of the indentation beneath the desk planner. She ran her hand along the bottom edge of the cabinet door. Her fingers found it, a minuscule, barely visible keyhole lock. It was secured by an old heavy-duty latch, clearly designed not just for security, but for secrecy. She searched through Eva's large ring of master keys for the apartment, discarding key after key. None of them fit. Frustrated, she tried a small, thin metal hair stick she used to hold her bun. It was too flimsy. Just as she was about to give up, she noticed a tiny, almost invisible imperfection in the marble floor just outside the cabinet. A small crack that seemed unnaturally straight. She scraped at it lightly with her fingernail. A tiny, ornate silver key, barely larger than her thumbnail, popped out. It had been meticulously tucked and glued into the crack, covered by a layer of dust and wax. It was a deliberate hiding place, accessible only by someone who knew to look for a flaw in the flawless marble. Her hands trembling with adrenaline, Maya inserted the key. It turned with a soft, expensive click. Inside the small compartment was not money or a document, but a small leather-bound diary, exactly the size of the indentation on the CEO's desk. Its pages were worn, not pristine. It was the heart of Alexander's deception. Maya hesitated. Opening it would cross a line from observation into direct invasion of privacy, a potentially career-ending, life-threatening act. But the sight of the journal, the palpable weight of the years it represented, was too much to resist. She carefully opened the diary to the first page. It was written in a tight, decisive hand. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, the date of the accident. The script wasn't about losing sight. It was about losing her, and a chilling sentence. The world must believe I am blind to see the truth clearly. Before she could read another word, the sound of the main elevator dinged. Alexander was returning. Maya hastily snapped the diary shut, returned it to its compartment, locked it, and replaced the tiny key in its hidden crevice just as Marcus reappeared, his eyes sharp and questioning. Maya's face felt hot, but she kept her hands busy, wiping a smudge on the glass. She had the secret now. She knew what the cover was for. Revenge. Certo. Refaça o capítulo 5 em inglês, garantindo que o confronto com Marcus seja intenso e que o mínimo de 3,00 caracteres seja atingido. Chapter 5. The Silent Guardian. Maya's silent alarm was ringing at full volume. She had invaded Alexander Sterling's sanctuary and read the words that confirmed her theory. Blindness was a carefully constructed smokescreen for a meticulous, deep-seated revenge. That diary was not just proof of the lie, it was the blueprint for his secret war. The following day, upon arriving at the Sterling Tower, the air felt thicker, colder. Eva attributed the tension to the pressure of the contract, but Maya knew the cause was herself. While cleaning the expansive quartz kitchen counter, an act that gave her peripheral view of the entire living area, Maya realized that Marcus, the chief of security, was more present than usual. He wasn't patrolling, he was observing. Alexander Sterling was in his study, likely using his perfectly intact vision to review documents. His navy blue suit, hanging flawlessly on the back of his chair, looked like armor temporarily set aside for internal work. Finally, Marcus intercepted her, not with a shout or an order, but with a slow, calculated movement that cornered her between the kitchen counter and the central island. Eva was in a distant side room, oblivious. "You are a curious young woman, Maya," Marcus's voice was a low, heavy murmur, completely devoid of emotion. He didn't seem angry, which was infinitely more frightening than a fit of rage. Maya kept her gaze fixed on the cleaning cloth in her hands, scrubbing a non-existent spot. "I am merely assisting my mother, Mr. Marcus. You are more than that. Your mother cleans. You analyze. I've seen your look. I've seen the way you study the placement of objects. People who work for Mr. Sterling don't need analysis. They require obedience." Maya felt the weight of Marcus's gaze, which seemed to bore right through her bones. She knew with a chill that he was aware of her small tests, the shifting of the cup, the movement of the vase. He might not know she had read the diary, but he knew she had breached the code of discretion. Mr. Sterling endured an incalculable tragedy. His blindness is a heavy burden he carries with dignity, Marcus continued, his voice hardening slightly. The last thing he needs is for someone to cause disruption. Anything that distracts him from his work or forces him to adapt to new arrangements can have severe consequences for those who are responsible for his well-being. The threat was clear, yet indirect. The severe consequences were not for Alexander, but for Eva. Her mother's contract, their sole source of stable income, hung in the balance. Maya finally lifted her gaze. "I do not intend to cause disruption, Mr. Marcus. I intend to do my work and help my mother." Marcus tilted his head, almost in acknowledgement. "Good. Remember this, Maya. Mr. Sterling's story is one of misfortune and resilience. That is the only story there is. Trying to rewrite it can be dangerous." He stepped back, breaking the enclosure. The exact moment Marcus retreated, the door to Alexander's study opened. The CEO emerged, immaculate in his navy blue suit, relying on his cane, his eyes fixed on the empty space ahead. "Marcus," Alexander said, his voice velvety and deep, "where is my tablet?" Marcus instantly replied, "To your left, Mr. Sterling, on the charging stand." Alexander walked in a straight line, retrieved the tablet without hesitation, and returned to his study without even acknowledging Maya's presence. The performance was flawless, a demonstration of dependence and precision based on Marcus's assistance. The entire scene was a coded message to Maya: "Marcus is his guardian, my facilitator, and we are aware of your movements." Maya understood his maneuver. Alexander had clocked her in his system and had confronted her through his most loyal guard. Instead of firing her, he had delivered an ultimatum: continue to clean and respect the charade, or lose everything. But Marcus's threat only served to propel her further. She had seen the pain of the trauma and the fierce determination for revenge in the diary. Now she knew she was on the right path. She couldn't simply return to being the invisible assistant. The only way to survive this game was to dive deeper and discover exactly who he was trying to deceive. The stakes were too high, the mystery too consuming, and the man in the navy blue suit too magnetic to simply walk away. Marcus's warning had the opposite effect of its intention. Instead of retreating, Maya became more cautious and more determined. She understood the unspoken hierarchy. Marcus was the shield, Alexander the sword. To understand the sword, she had to understand the history carved onto its blade. The entry in the diary, dated 3 years ago, referred not only to losing her, but to finishing what was started 20 years ago. This was not merely about Alexander's personal tragedy, it was a legacy of betrayal. Maya, utilizing the university's online archives, a resource she still technically had access to as a part-time art student, began researching the history of Sterling Corp. Her search criteria were specific: 20 years ago, corporate betrayals, and the name Sterling. The results were sparse at first, obscured by layers of official public relations. But Maya, with her eye for detail, found a thread. An old business magazine article detailing a major shakeup at Sterling Corp 2 decades prior. The headline was innocuous: Sterling leadership transition. But the content detailed the unexpected ouster of Alexander's father, the original CEO, shortly before his premature death. The key figure in the corporate takeover was Elias Thorne, the father's longtime business partner and COO. Thorne was now a powerful rival, running his own separate major investment firm, Thorne Financial. The articles painted Thorne as a visionary who wisely bought out the weak link when the elder Sterling supposedly suffered a mental breakdown. Maya cross-referenced Thorne's photo. He was a distinguished older man, always wearing a calm, almost paternal smile in every picture. A typical white-collar villain, hiding his ambition behind civility. She realized the scale of the game. Alexander wasn't playing against an anonymous corporate threat. He was playing against a man who had stolen his family's company and reputation 2 decades prior. The current CEO, Alexander, was simply using the same tactic, betrayal and weakness, to lure his enemy into the open. That evening, back in the penthouse, Alexander was in the library again, working. Maya was dusting the display case in the long, dark hallway that led to the private wing. She risked glancing toward the semi-open library door. Alexander was sitting at a massive mahogany desk, still in his navy blue suit, dictating notes to a discreet digital recorder. The light of the desk lamp glinted off the perfect sheen of his shoes. He looked utterly focused, completely sighted. Maya noticed a photograph on a side table, a young Alexander, probably around 10, standing next to his proud father. The 2 men wore the same intense, intelligent gaze. In the background of the photo, a figure was blurred, but Maya could just make out the distinctive suit and height of Elias Thorne. Thorne was family, or at least he had pretended to be. The revenge wasn't just about the company or the money. It was about the destruction of a family legacy. Later, Alexander emerged from the library, walking his practiced blind route towards the kitchen for a late-night drink. He stopped near the hallway where Maya was working. "The air is still in here," Alexander stated, his voice quiet, his sightless eyes aimed slightly to the left of her head. It wasn't a question, but a demand for information about the airflow system. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. The vent in this hall seems to be blocked by an excess of dust. I can clear it tomorrow," Maya replied, her voice steady. Alexander tilted his head, listening not to her words but to her tone. "Ensure you do. Stale air affects focus." He then continued, his cane tapping. Maya realized 2 things. First, he used sensory observations, the stale air, as a genuine tool to guide him, but also as a way to maintain the facade. Second, and more importantly, his ability to focus was paramount. His entire plan hinged on clarity and order. Maya's investigation into Thorne provided the necessary context. Alexander was using his apparent weakness, blindness, to bait Thorne into making a decisive move, believing the CEO was too incapacitated to defend himself or discover the old documents of betrayal. The what Alexander was hiding was not just the fact that he could see. The what was that he was a meticulously prepared avenger who was about to strike a corporate empire from the inside out. And Maya was now standing in the war room. Maya's defiance, subtle though it was, had not gone unnoticed by the man whose survival depended on absolute predictability. The morning after Marcus's oblique threat, Alexander Sterling executed a deliberate departure from his routine. He remained in the vast, cedar-lined library long after his customary mid-morning break. Maya was organizing the antique leather-bound books along one wall, a tedious task she usually enjoyed for its quiet solitude. Today, the air was heavy with anticipation. Alexander sat at his desk, still in his commanding navy blue suit, his sightless gaze fixed on the mahogany wall. He was not working, he was waiting. Marcus was nowhere in sight, a deliberate absence Maya noted immediately. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice quiet, yet sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Maya, isn't it?" Maya stopped, her fingers resting on a volume of Roman history. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. You broke the code." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the flat certainty of a judge reading a verdict. Maya's heart hammered, but she met the challenge. She refused to lie, knowing he would see through it. "I don't know what code you mean, sir," she replied, keeping her voice low and steady, yet deliberately devoid of the subservience he expected. A small, genuine smile touched the corner of his mouth, a smile that only appeared when he knew he was winning. "The code of this house, Maya. The code of invisibility. The code of belief. You are not a cleaner. You are an observer. You see the vase move when no one else does. You see the hesitation when no one else is looking. You see that I am not blind." He tapped his desk twice, a crisp final sound. "Marcus sees you testing me. He reports your curiosity. Most people would have been dismissed or quietly intimidated into silence. But you showed courage, and you chose to investigate rather than retreat. Why?" Maya straightened, brushing the dust from her hands. "Because I saw a man hiding a terrible pain, not just a man hiding a trick, and because the accident story doesn't fit the details. If you were really incapacitated, you wouldn't be able to run this empire. You are not just blind, you are waiting." Alexander stood up, moving away from his desk. His cane touched the floor only for effect, his movement fluid and precise. He approached the wall where she stood, stopping just feet away. The proximity was startling. The power emanating from him in the navy blue suit was overwhelming. "You read the diary," he stated, his voice now dangerously soft. Maya nodded once, a gesture he could not see, yet she felt compelled to offer. He sighed, the sound carrying a weight of 3 years of lies. "The world believes I am a victim. A resilient one, yes, but a victim nonetheless. That makes them sloppy. It makes them complacent. They believe I am incapable of seeing the old patterns, the subtle movements, the betrayal right under my nose." He finally revealed the deeper layer of the deception. "The man who caused the accident, the man who took my fiancée and ruined my life, is the same man who helped ruin my father's reputation 20 years ago, Elias Thorne. He thinks that with me weakened, he can seize the final asset he's always wanted, the original sterling patent portfolio, which he believes is hidden somewhere only a sighted person could find. He is looking for a document, and he thinks my blindness is his time window." Alexander leaned slightly closer. "I need someone with an artist's eye, someone who sees what's out of place, someone who can confirm the blind spots in my own network. You are the only person who knows I can see, Maya. That makes you my greatest threat, or my most valuable asset." He extended a hand, a large, powerful, perfectly directed hand towards her. Help me maintain this perfect lie. Be my eyes in the darkness, and I promise you 2 things, protection from Thorne and the truth about what happened." The air crackled with the sheer audacity of the proposal. He was offering her a partnership in a high-stakes game of corporate war and revenge. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore, she was a spy. Maya looked at his outstretched hand, a silent challenge. She knew the risk, but the pull of the mystery and the quiet justice she sensed in his gaze was irresistible. The handshake sealed the deadliest partnership Maya had ever imagined. The pressure of Alexander's grip was firm, a silent promise of both power and danger. She felt the weight of the massive secret settle over her. "The lie must be flawless, Maya. Not even your mother can know," Alexander instructed, releasing her hand. He immediately returned to his blind posture, tapping his cane as he moved back to his desk. Their new relationship required an entirely new system of communication, a silent code that could be executed under the ever-present vigilance of Marcus, whom Alexander assured her was loyal, but too rigid to be trusted with the true objective. Their method was brilliant in its simplicity, born from their shared environment, cleaning. "You will use the mess to communicate the truth," Alexander explained. "This house is pristine. A single deviation from the standard pattern will be a flag for me." They established a system based on common household items. The sugar bowl. If the sugar bowl in the kitchen was moved 2 inches to the left, it meant danger is imminent. Do not trust the person near you. If moved 2 inches to the right, it meant new information is available. The bookshelf. A book turned spine in on the lower shelf meant Thorne is moving on the corporate side. A book turned spine out meant Thorn is moving on the physical security side. The pen, the silver desk pen, when placed diagonally across the desk, meant I need a private, uninterrupted moment to talk. The first few days were tense. Maya felt the immense strain of maintaining the pretense while also actively working against it. She was no longer simply wiping down surfaces. She was choreographing small, silent acts of espionage. She watched Alexander, the man in the navy blue suit, perform his blindness with newfound appreciation for his acting skills. He would deliberately stumble over a rug he clearly saw, or ask Marcus for an item that was easily within reach, just to maintain the image of dependency. Their most critical challenge was the private meeting. Alexander risked too much using the diagonal pen signal, so they devised a time, 2 a.m. His personal wing had a small, forgotten sunroom whose ancient door lock was loud. If Maya saw the pen signal before leaving, she was to return at 2 a.m. and wait for the click of the sunroom door. Maya, feeling the thrilling adrenaline of the risk, spent the next week investigating Thorn Financial. She discovered that Thorn was quietly buying up massive amounts of Sterling Corp stock, using a network of shell companies. He was preparing for a hostile takeover, likely believing Alexander was too weak to fight back. One evening, while organizing files in the library, she saw it, the silver pen, now lying at a 45-degree angle on the mahogany surface. Her heart soared with a mixture of fear and excitement. Alexander needed her. She finished her shift with Eva, walking out into the cold city air, and then, at 1:45 a.m., and she returned, slipping back into the tower using an old staff keycard Marcus had given Eva, a subtle advantage that had suddenly become vital. The penthouse was pitch black and silent. The city lights cast long, cold shadows through the glass walls. Maya moved like a ghost through the labyrinth of luxury, acutely aware that one wrong step could alert Marcus, who patrolled the lower floors. She waited by the sunroom door. The silence was deafening, amplifying every tremor of fear. Exactly at 2 a.m., a soft, unmistakable click echoed from inside. She opened the door and stepped in. Alexander Sterling was standing by the window, not blind, not weak, illuminated by the cold blue light of the metropolis. "Thorn is moving, Maya," he said, skipping any greeting. "He's making his play. We have to act now." The game was no longer theoretical. It was real. The silence of the sunroom was shattered by the enormity of Alexander's admission. "Thorn isn't just buying stock," he explained, his eyes, now fiercely focused, burning in the dark. "He's preparing a legal claim that requires an old critical document from the original Sterling patents. If he gets that, he takes the company and proves my father was a fraud." Alexander walked to a hidden wall panel, which slid open to reveal a highly secured digital workstation. He was still in his navy blue suit, the image of a man ready for battle, not retirement. "I need you to confirm something only a non-blind person could, the location of the target." He showed Maya a complex, multi-layered digital blueprint of the Sterling Tower's deepest vault. The vault contained the corporation's historical assets. Thorn's team was planning an audit the following week, believing Alexander's blindness meant he hadn't moved the critical document. "The document is the founding charter. It must be moved before the audit," Alexander stated. "But I suspect Thorn has a plant in the vault team who will try to remove a different, equally vital document, one that grants full proxy to his own firm." Maya's task was surgical. During her cleaning shift the next day, she had to locate a unique, non-digital clue hidden in the CEO's main office that confirmed which vault container Thorn's agent would target. "Why me? Why not Marcus?" Maya asked, needing to understand the hierarchy of trust. "Because Marcus is a soldier. He believes the official story and would think this is reckless. And because the clue is visual, a reflection, a pattern, something a sighted person would dismiss as random debris," Alexander explained. "Thorn knows I'm a stickler for order. He left the clue for me, knowing I wouldn't see it." But the next day, the tension in the penthouse was suffocating. Alexander sat in the library, performing his blind CEO act to perfection, occasionally asking Marcus for trivial things to maintain his alibi. Maya entered the main office, searching for the visual anomaly. She meticulously cleaned the mahogany surfaces, the glass cabinets, and the heavy drapes. Nothing. She moved to Alexander's desk. She cleaned the silver lighter, the day planner, and the paperweight. All returned to their perfect alignment. Then she noticed it. On the shiny, polished mahogany surface, near the inkwell, was a nearly invisible streak. It was not a scratch, but a trail of dried, clear lacquer. It was the shape of a Roman numeral X. She subtly cleaned the lacquer streak away, but not before memorizing its exact location, the Roman numeral X. Later, in the privacy of the sunroom during their prearranged 2 a.m. meeting, Maya relayed the finding. Alexander's eyes widened with sharp recognition. "Container X," he whispered, typing furiously on the hidden workstation. "Thorn is targeting Vault Container X. That holds the corporate proxies. He isn't looking for the past. He's looking to seize the future." The plan suddenly snapped into place for Maya. Alexander had feigned blindness, not only to lure Thorn out, but to force Thorn to communicate his moves using a medium, visual clues, that Alexander pretended he couldn't perceive. The CEO in the navy blue suit had turned his weakness into the most dangerous weapon imaginable: invisibility. "We moved the proxies out of Container X before the audit," Alexander said, his voice hard as stone. "You've saved the company, Maya. Now we fight back." The immediate threat of the hostile takeover was neutralized, thanks to Maya's visual confirmation of Container X. Alexander was able to subtly orchestrate the movement of the critical proxy documents before Thorn's audit team could access the wrong vault. But the corporate battle only scratched the surface. Maya knew the driving force was not profit, it was revenge. In their next sunroom meeting, Alexander, tired but triumphant in his navy blue suit, finally unlocked the final layer of the truth, the real reason for the 20-year-old secret. "The accident was not random, Maya," Alexander began, his voice dropping to a raw, emotional pitch she hadn't heard before. "Thorn was trying to kill me to gain final control before my father's old documents expired. He believed the documents revealing his initial corporate betrayal were still active." He showed her the old photograph she had once seen, the one with him, his father, and the blurred figure of Thorn. Next to it, he placed a photo of a beautiful, vibrant young woman, his fiancée, Lena. Lena was an investigative journalist. She found the 20-year-old evidence that proved Thorn had framed my father for fraud. Thorn knew she was going public. He arranged the accident. He aimed to kill both of us, eliminate the evidence, and cement his position as a corporate hero. Alexander paused, his eyes glazing over with pure, unadulterated grief and fury. "I survived, but Lena didn't. When I woke up, I knew my only path to justice, true, total justice, was to become nothing, to become blind. The world had to believe I was incapable of revenge, incapable of finding the evidence. It was my only way to bait Thorn into exposing his current, vast network of corruption." The "what it was" in the title was now terrifyingly clear to Maya. Alexander was not a CEO. He was a meticulous, wounded avenger. Thorn is a predator. He has corrupted judges, politicians, and half the board. The documents he seeks are not the final goal. They are part of a larger, systemic web of crime. I had to let him think I was weak, so he would make a confident public move that I could use to destroy him, legally and completely. Maya realized the extent of the sacrifice. Alexander had given up his sight, his fiancée, his public reputation, and his personal life for 3 years, all to orchestrate this singular moment of justice. "My goal is not just to reclaim the company," Alexander concluded, his eyes fixed on the photograph of Lena. "My goal is to destroy his entire network and ensure the documents Lena found are brought to light." Maya, looking at the two photographs, felt a deep sense of empathy shift into a powerful sense of purpose. This was not about a job anymore. It was about honoring Lena and her pursuit of truth. "What is the final piece of evidence we need?" Maya asked, fully accepting her role as his confidant and accomplice. Alexander turned back to his digital workstation. "Thorne has an accomplice in the tower, someone loyal enough to steal the document. We need a way to prove that accomplice is linked to Thorne. We need a meeting, a transaction, something irrefutable." The final phase of the plan was now clear. The objective was clear. Identify Thorne's mole within the Sterling Tower, the person who would have attempted to steal the proxy documents from Container X. Alexander already had a short list of suspects among the high-level executives, but he needed visual confirmation. Their focus turned to the upcoming annual Sterling Gala, the last major event before the public audit. Thorne would be there, and his mole would need a final secret communication. "The mole must be someone who believes they can outsmart me, the blind CEO, with a visual signal," Alexander explained to Maya during their 2 a.m. strategy session. He was studying photos of his executives, still looking sharp in his navy blue suit, though the jacket was now open. Maya, ever the observer, had a different perspective. "The mole must also be someone who feels safe when my mother and I are around. Someone who has seen me clean and dismisses me completely." They devised a plan centered on a piece of art that Alexander was installing in the main hall. A large, complex, abstract sculpture that had not been there before the accident. Alexander insisted the sculpture had specific pockets and angles, perfect for a hidden message. Maya's job was to place a tiny, high-definition camera, provided by Alexander, within a cavity of the sculpture during her cleaning shift, aimed at a specific spot on the floor nearby, a spot where a mole might leave a visual cue, such as a dropped item or a misplaced signal. The difficulty was Marcus. Marcus's vigilance had only increased since the proxy documents were safely moved. The installation day was tense. While Alexander performed his act of overseeing the installation, directing the movers with remarkable yet seemingly auditory precision, Maya positioned the camera. She saw him then. Mr. Davies, the COO, the man who had always been deferential and seemed genuinely concerned for Alexander's well-being. Davies walked past the sculpture, a nervous edge to his movements. He stopped briefly, pretending to adjust his cufflink. As he did, he didn't look at the sculpture, but at the exact spot Maya was aiming her camera, a small, dark groove in the marble floor. Davies then dropped a single, bright red paper clip into the groove, covering it with the toe of his shoe for a microsecond before moving on. The gesture was quick, subtle, and meaningless to anyone not looking for it. Maya's blood ran cold. Mr. Davies, the loyal COO, was the mole. The red paperclip was a signal, a call to action. She managed to activate the camera just as Davies left the hallway. The footage, once retrieved, would be irrefutable. Later that night, Alexander, receiving the news, felt a wave of icy determination. "A red paperclip," he murmured, his eyes full of contempt. "A clear, visual marker. He thought I wouldn't see it." The game was nearly over. The mole was identified. Now, they needed to use Davies's next move to capture Thorne. "The gala is tomorrow," Alexander stated, folding his hands. "Davies will use the paperclip signal again. He will use it to tell Thorne where and when they need to meet to execute the final stage of the original plan, the public framing of my father." Maya was going to the gala, not as staff, but as Alexander Sterling's unexpected guest. The annual Sterling Gala was a symphony of wealth and power, a high-stakes gathering of New York's elite. Maya, usually the invisible worker, was transformed. Alexander had provided her with a stunning, simple black dress, telling her to wear the confidence of someone who belonged there. She walked in on Alexander's arm. He was magnificent in his navy blue suit, his figure radiating authority. He walked with his cane, maintaining the facade of the brave, blind CEO for the hundreds of watchful eyes. The reaction was immediate. Whispers followed them like a trail of smoke. Who was the young woman? Why was Alexander Sterling, who avoided public intimacy, leaning on her arm? Maya's role was critical. She was his eyes in the crowd. She had to watch Thorne and Davies and anticipate their coded movements. Thorne, the rival CEO, was a charismatic figure, working the room with effortless charm. Davies, the mole, was tense, his gaze darting around, looking for a private moment to signal his master. Maya spotted Davies first. He moved to a small serving table near a large floral arrangement. He pretended to spill a drink, and while a waiter cleaned it, Davies made his move. He placed a single rosebud on the table, its stem pointing towards the secluded South Terrace. The time was 10 p.m. South Terrace. 10 p.m. Maya registered the signal instantly. She squeezed Alexander's arm, the pre-arranged signal for "I have the location." Alexander, maintaining his sightless smile for the cameras, leaned in. "What is it?" he murmured. "Davies left a rosebud pointing South Terrace. 10 p.m. She whispered back. "He's calling Thorne for the final move." "Excellent. You are proving invaluable, Maya." Alexander's voice was a low compliment. "The document Thorne is using to frame my father is hidden in a vault across the street. Davies will hand Thorne a key to access it after they confirm my vulnerability." At 9:45 p.m., Alexander excused himself, stating he needed a moment of quiet, a common need for a blind person in a noisy environment. Maya helped guide him to an unused private study. Marcus quickly followed them, suspicious. "The meeting is at 10 p.m., Alexander told Marcus, his voice suddenly sharp, his eyes perfectly focused. He dropped the cane onto the couch. "Thorne and Davies are meeting on the South Terrace. You have 15 minutes to position your team. Davies will hand Thorne a key. You must seize the key, not the men. The key is the physical evidence." Marcus stared at Alexander, processing the sudden reveal of the truth he was sworn to protect, yet had never known. The shock on Marcus's face was profound. "Sir, your eyes," Marcus stammered. "They were never blind, Marcus. Only waiting. Now go. You have a job to do." Marcus, the loyal soldier, immediately snapped into action. He needed no further explanation. The loyalty was to the Sterling name, not the charade. Maya and Alexander waited. The moment of truth was imminent. At 10 p.m., the confrontation unfolded on the chilly, secluded South Terrace. Alexander, still wearing his navy blue suit, stood hidden by a cluster of tall planters, Maya at his side. He had brought a small, high-powered digital camera, the same one they used for surveillance, ready to capture the final act. Thorne and Davies met precisely on time. Davies was visibly agitated, while Thorne remained calm, a predator cornered, but still confident. "Did you confirm the CEO's state?" Thorne hissed, glancing back at the lights of the ballroom. "Yes, he's totally reliant on the girl," Davies confirmed, pulling out a small, old brass key. "He is distracted by her. The vault is still accessible. This key is your final access to the original founding documents. With these, we publicly dismantle the Sterling name tomorrow." Thorne reached out his hand, eyes glittering with triumphant greed. "Excellent, Davies. You've earned your—" Before Thorne could finish, a harsh, commanding voice sliced through the cold night air. "He's earned a jail cell, Thorne." Alexander Sterling stepped out from behind the planters. He was not tapping his cane. He was walking with the deliberate, powerful stride of a man in absolute control. His eyes, those famous light grey eyes, were not empty. They were narrowed, cold, and fixed with devastating clarity on the two men. The sight had the desired effect. Davies gasped and stumbled back, dropping the key onto the marble floor. Thorne froze, his jaw slack, the mask of civility shattered by pure, paralyzing shock. "Alexander? But the accident! Your eyes!" Thorne stammered, his voice cracking. "The accident was your attempt to murder me, Thorne." "A failure, thankfully," Alexander stated, his voice ringing with authority. "The blindness was my defense. It was my way of letting you think the playing field was level, that I was too weak to see you move. You fell for the most arrogant of assumptions, that you were smarter than a blind man. As Marcus's security team swarmed the terrace, seizing the fallen key and moving in on the two men, Alexander turned his camera on the frozen pair and took a picture, not for evidence, but for the satisfaction of capturing their moment of defeat. "You left a red paperclip, Davies," Alexander said, the sheer disdain in his voice chilling. "A single rosebud pointing south. You communicated in images, believing I was incapable of seeing. But you forgot one thing. I wasn't the one watching." He turned to Maya, who stood slightly behind him, holding the composure of a seasoned strategist. She was. The confrontation was swift. Thorne and Davies were detained. The key was secured. The 3-year deception was over. Alexander Sterling had reclaimed his vision, his company, and his father's honor in a single perfectly executed maneuver. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, but contained. The brief scene on the South Terrace was swiftly managed by Marcus, who moved Thorne and Davies out before the guests inside realized the gravity of the incident. Alexander escorted Maya back into the private study, the room now feeling like a decompression chamber. He was still wearing his navy blue suit, but the stiffness had gone out of his posture. The mask was entirely off. He was simply Alexander, exhausted and victorious. "It's over," he breathed, sinking onto a plush armchair. "It's over," Maya echoed, the adrenaline finally starting to recede, leaving her shaking. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time without the veil of the charade. His grey eyes were clear, direct, and filled with gratitude. "You asked me once, Maya, why I was doing this," Alexander said, picking up the small silver pen from his desk. "It wasn't just for my father's name. It was for Lena." He pulled out the leather-bound diary from the lockbox he had retrieved earlier. He opened it, not to his own writing, but to a small, hidden pocket inside the back cover. From it, he pulled a brittle, folded document, the true key. "This is what Thorne was really after," he explained. "This is a document Lena managed to copy right before the accident. Proof that Thorne had systematically defrauded every major charitable trust he'd ever managed. It's a lifetime of systemic crime. The corporate takeover was just a distraction." Maya realized the what he was of the story. Alexander was not just a vengeful son. He was a protector of a greater truth. He was a hero who had sacrificed his identity to deliver justice not just for his family, but for countless victims of Thorne's corruption. "The blindness," Alexander continued, his voice thick with emotion, "was the ultimate test of my resolve. It forced me to be precise. It forced me to rely only on the unseen. It was the price of justice. And you, Maya, were the final necessary piece of the puzzle. You saw the truth when everyone else, including Marcus, only saw the performance." He looked at the small piece of paper in his hands, Lena's proof. "We will hand this over to the federal authorities tomorrow. It's time for the real story to come out." The victory was bittersweet. The justice was earned, but the cost was still evident in the exhaustion etched onto Alexander's face. He had lost 3 years of his life and the woman he loved. "Your mother's contract," Alexander said, his tone switching back to the practical CEO. "I assure you it is secure, but your future does not lie in cleaning." He looked at her with genuine respect. "You have the mind of an investigator and the eye of an artist. You see things that no one else does. I need those skills. I want you on my team, in a role dedicated to security and strategic analysis. Start tomorrow." Maya didn't hesitate. She had saved a company and solved a murder. Cleaning suddenly seemed impossibly small. "I accept, Mr. Sterling." The sun began to rise over Manhattan, casting a clear, golden light into the study. The room, which had always been a lair of deception, was finally illuminated by the honest, brilliant light of the morning. The following week, the Sterling Tower was buzzing with a different kind of energy. The official announcement was discreet but devastating. The arrest of Elias Thorne and the COO, Mr. Davies, on multiple charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The story of Alexander Sterling's miraculous recovery from psychological blindness spread through the media, a recovery he was careful to allow, knowing the spectacle would distract from the deeper truth. Maya was back in the penthouse for one last shift under her old title. Eva, now secure in her contract, was proud and completely unaware of her daughter's pivotal role. Maya stood in Alexander's study, wearing her simple cleaner's uniform for the last time. Alexander was on the phone, his voice echoing the confidence of a CEO who was now completely unburdened. He was still in his navy blue suit, but today it felt less like armor and more like the uniform of a king who had finally secured his throne. He ended the call and walked over to her. He was no longer using the cane, his movements powerful and free. "Your last act of cleaning, Maya," he said, a genuine warmth in his voice. "From tomorrow, you start your new role as my strategic analyst." Maya picked up her cleaning cloth. She moved to the desk, her eyes scanning the immaculate surface. She wiped down the pen, the lighter, and the paperweight. All returned to their perfect, precise alignment. The subtle marks, the coded signals, the invisible lacquer streak, all gone. The slate was clean. "I won't miss the 2 a.m. meetings," she admitted, smiling. Alexander moved closer, leaning against the desk. "We won't need the sunroom any longer. We can use the conference room in the light." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "You saved me, Maya. You forced me to trust someone again. You saw the difference between the performance and the truth. What you did was more than strategic. It was moral." He extended his hand again, not for a secret pact this time, but for a handshake of equals. "Welcome to the team." Maya took his hand, the exchange of power evident in the strength of their combined grip. She glanced out the window at the vast, clear expanse of Manhattan. She had arrived here as an invisible worker, and now she was a partner in the highest echelons of power. She had finished the final wipe of the counter. The physical act of cleaning was over. But the way she looked at the world, her incredible attention to detail, her ability to see what others missed, that was the gift she would take into her new life. Alexander, in his navy blue suit, did not look at her as a CEO looks at an employee. He looked at her as a man who had shared a dangerous, life-altering secret with the one person who truly saw him. The gaze was direct, trusting, and full of possibility. The game was over, but their story was just beginning.